Alrighty then, it's time for a Jarvan game, but I will be using this video mostly for ganking tips. Which is good because I was playing with fans the other day and they were having a big issue with ganking. Which too, in that, when it comes towards ganking, most people just assume that it's just show up and kill somebody. But when when you're trying to gank more experienced players, you just can't do that. They'll know what you're wanting to do. They'll be prepared. They'll be playing a little bit more safe. So you have to get a bit more accustomed to, sort of predicting their movements and responding towards them rather than trying to force things to happen. And one good way of doing this is by paying attention to the minimap so you can sort of gauge what they're wanting to do. If you look at the minimap right now, you can see my top lane is pushing against the Vladimir. He's winning, so Vladimir right now likely just wants to survive. Yasuo is on top of Mordekaiser and constantly pushing against him. That means that Yasuo is likely wanting to be super aggro. Therefore, you can assume right now that mid lane is probably your best choice towards ganking because Yasuo is going to put himself in a vulnerable spot. And lo and behold, you see he's pretty damn low health, constantly pushed against my tower, and so I can basically just waltz in there. And you'll see me, I want to flash W and apply the red. My EQ will miss, but mostly because I predicted his movement wrong, but thankfully Mordekaiser killed him. See, this is just kind of the easy way to do it. I didn't have to show up there, I just had to look at the minimap and sort of predict the flow of the game. Vladimir likely just wanted to be safe, so therefore the likelihood of him being pushed against the tower, making him easier to gank, would have been very low. Also being pushing in aggro against the Mordekaiser put the chances of him being in a vulnerable spot very high. And same thing again. Now Vladimir is pushed against my Aurelion Sol teammate, but Vladimir isn't exactly an easy one to gank alongside Aurelion Sol. And Yasuo still, once again, is just being very aggro, so I just kind of have to wait for him just to dash towards my Mordekaiser, and then I quickly engage. It's easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? It's kind of cheating because Yasuo is a very, very obviously aggressive champion, but on most champions you can sort of predict this. Don't waste your time going after targets who aren't very vulnerable or aren't going to be putting themselves naturally at a disadvantage. Like if your opponent is someone like Lissandra doesn't tend to play very aggro, so there's not a real good chance you're going to be able to gank her. But someone against like a Riven or Yasuo, you can sort of tell they're going to want to go for kills and want to go for lane advantage, so you can sort of predict their movements. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that your opponent can do this too. Look at my Mordekaiser teammate. He's pushing mid against the Yasuo now because he got a little bit of advantage early. But because of that, Lee Sin shows up to punish him and kill him. The thing is, jungling is all about this little mind game here. You have to react to the laners, but you also have to predict as to what the enemy jungler wants to do based on what your teammates are doing. So when you're looking at the minimap, you're not only paying attention to the enemy, you're paying attention to your teammates. Look at what they want to do. If your teammates are getting aggressive, the two things might happen. One, they might become easy targets for your Lee Sin, like right here. Lee Sin once again goes against the Mordekaiser because he's being very aggro, so I show up to counter gank him and turn the tables, and we eventually slowly kill him. Anyways, back to what I was saying. The other thing is that they're also being very aggro. Your opponent might actually play a little bit more safer, so it might be making it more difficult for you to gank them because you're going to be, wary of their surroundings. So it becomes, again, a game of chess. You have to sort of think ahead of it. When it comes against a jungler, you have to predict what they want to do and therefore try to set up a plan to counter what they're wanting to do. And they might predict what you want to do to counter their thing, so they might counter your counter, and so on and so forth. It's a very elaborate game of cat and mouse. Right now, my bottom lane is in a very, very compromised situation. Right? If I was Lee Sin, I'm like, I want a beeline for this. I'm gonna go kill these guys. So you can see me try to run there as quickly as possible to counter the Lee Sin, and unfortunately, he gets there in time to kill Alistair before I show up. So that's the whole thing. That's the main thing I want people to get from this. You're supposed to be constantly thinking as to what the enemy jungler wants to do and make your plans accordingly. Do you want to counter gank them to support your teammates, or do you want to kill the enemy target to suppress the enemy? In this kind of matchup, I need to do sort of quasi both. I need to make sure Yasuo loses, so Mordekaiser has to win, but I also have to make sure Lee Sin doesn't get crazy or anything. So most of the time in this game, I was playing around predicting Lee Sin's movements, putting wards against him, showing up to where he wants to be, or at least trying to. And also ganking Yasuo, even though that's kind of pretty damn easy to do anyways. So I'm just hoping you guys are sort of getting the idea behind this. Most champions can do this, just showing presence and just, you know, stabbing at people. Also, another thing I forgot to point out, but you might want to rewind it to check this out. In every single one of my ganks, and in the counter gank, I waited for my targets to use their mobility as an offensive choice. As a result, they couldn't use it to retreat from me. Even though they all in on the Mordekaiser and use their abilities, I managed to show fresh, and they can't deal with me with my cooldowns available to do offense. So, even though the Mordekaiser takes a bulk of damage, they can't do fight me off. So even if they do a lot of damage to Mordekaiser, there's a good chance I'd kick their asses. So when you want to gank something, wait for their resources to be spent. Wait for them to use their flash, their ultimate, or something. If they're going to commit to killing one of your teammates and they can't 100% them, that's probably the best time. Like if Yasuo goes in right now against a Mordekaiser, he can't kill him in like one combo. So I just kind of waited for the Yasuo to get super aggro and to fully commit. So the second he uses it, I have him basically pinned down because he pins himself down in the air, and he can't do anything to fight me off. So he's just completely in a negative situation the second I show up. So just you got to keep those things in mind. Can your teammates survive the initiation of the enemy team? Then use them as bait and then jump in. Otherwise, you have to react towards their offense and maybe sort of soak some of it up. You gotta sort of get into the idea of either using your teammates as live bait or using yourself as a reinforcement. It's a little bit more complicated. Not all the footage here shows except that little Yasuo gang. That's probably the only scene from this video that actually showcases that properly. So keep that in mind. Here is another pretty easy gank. Just kind of the Caitlyn, no mana, and you just saw her burn her flash. I can fully commit all my resources just to murdering her ass because she foolishly stuck around for too long. So that's a standard. Situation. No resources, no chance in hell. Full on commit 100% to killing him. Even if somebody else showed up, there was a good chance I wasn't gonna die. So that also reminds me of one thing towards ganking. A lot of people frown upon, or at least a lot of lower division people frown upon no-kill ganks. You know, when you gank, not all ganks result in kills. Sometimes they result in some burning summoner spells. Best case scenario is you kill them and they burn their summoner spells. Worst case is where you just burn their wards. And that's not exactly the worst thing possible either. So it comes in strides. You kind of want to trade sort of equally or just slightly above them. Like if you burn their summoner spells, you might only want to burn your flash rather than 2 flashes, and so on and so forth. Sometimes burning their summoner spells tends to be better than killing the target outright. I mean, if you kill them and they burn both summoner spells, of course it's the best, but sometimes burning their summoner spells instead of killing them can be a ridiculously good result, because now they're kind of forced to play safe. They're going to lose on the CS, and your laner themselves will be able to bully them. And therefore, you don't have to show up in lane anymore until the summoner spells refresh. By the way, here's just a tiny little tip that doesn't have to do anything with ganking. When Jarvan does Dragon, look at how I do the EQ. Just, as he knocks me away, I use my Q so the animation doesn't get, the animation doesn't get cancelled by it, so it drags me, and I don't lose any actual time between my auto attacks against the dragon thanks to my Q. Just a tiny little hint, a tiny little tip. Doesn't make too much of a difference, but it just looks kind of cool. Anyways, I'm hoping this is helping you guys a little bit. Ganking is more complex than what I'm even showcasing in this video, but it's just, again, it's the whole looking at the minimap, sort of predicting what your opponents want to do and reacting towards it. Because the worst thing you want to do when ganking is waste time. And ganking in general is just kind of the management of time. You want to make them waste their time and their resources for equal or more than what you're wasting. So when you show up in a lane and you force them to go home, you're wasting their time, and therefore you're not really suffering as much as you want to. If you show up to the lane and you sit there for 10-20 seconds and not doing anything or even attempting to gank, then that's ridiculously detrimental. And that's what I noticed a lot of my inexperienced fans and a lot of the lower division players when I played on a Smurf account do. They just kind of show up and try to make something happen, but that's the worst sin you could do for jungling, trying to force a situation. You just have to naturally let it happen. And I know I'm sort of repeating myself a few times, but I just can't stress it enough. A lot of players just don't seem to get the hang of it. Minimap is the most valuable thing. If you guys remember, or if you've watched my stream, I do that often. By the way, here I completely overestimate my power to kill them, so you're gonna see me die like a bitch. But either way, if you watch me stream, I constantly say things. If I was Lee Sin, I would assume, I mean, I would want to be killing top lane right now, or if I was Lee Sin, I'd be getting the Scuttle Crab, I would be warding here, I would want to kill me, I would be on the lookout for me as Jarvan, etc, etc. I'm constantly thinking that, constantly saying that, constantly paying attention to the map, and just sort of trying to react and be proactive. Like, wasting time, I mean, if wasting time doing nothing is the worst thing you can do, like I already said, but just thinking, just warding, just making your movements worthwhile, like just showing up and showing presence here, or just gathering knowledge by, you know, oh, I showed up here and they know I'm, and they reacted towards me, that, okay, I know this is warded. That is still being proactive. It might feel like a waste of time, but knowing where wards are is important too, so you can sort of assume, okay, since this is warded, they're likely playing aggressive, they're likely playing safe, so they want to do a couple things, etc, etc. Basically, the more information that you have, the more you can assume about the movements of the enemy as a result, and further on plan your stuff. Like, again, the whole warding thing, like let's say bottom lane has 2 wards securing themselves. They're going to be playing confidently, and their whole super aggressiveness isn't them just being stupid, it's they're playing they know they're very safe, so they're not going to, you know, they're not going to be worried about me. Therefore, their jungler might not actually have to support them, or might not be anywhere near them, so I can assume that Lee Sin is like top lane in their jungle or bottom lane, etc, etc, as long as your own bottom lane teammates aren't, you know, getting super aggressive or being stupid and giving Lee Sin enough reason to go after them, right? So anything you do, even if it seems very minor, as long as you're actively collecting information, paying attention to the map, sharing this information with your teammates, it's still a positive gain. It's still not a waste of time. So when you play your next games, whatever division you are, I hope, especially if you're a jungler, I hope you start taking that into account. Take into account everything that happens, pay attention to every little detail, and watch your minimap carefully. And you'll start noticing that, hey, you know, these are some opportunities that have been missing for a long time, and hopefully it starts improving your ganking. Because this is one of the advices a stronger player gave to me a long time ago, around Season 1, and it made me a far, far, far better ganker. Ironically, it was also with Jarvan, so that's fun. Either way, I hope you enjoy this, and I hope it might be able to help you, and I hope it might help those people that were playing with me the other day, because they specifically asked me to make this video. Anyways, thank you for watching. Videos like this are made possible by my sponsors, Crunchyroll and Loot Crate. Loot Crate's upcoming April crate contains Harry Potter, Vikings, Labyrinth of the David Bowie kind, and Uncharted stuff. If you're interested in any of those themes and would like to check out the offer, click the link in the description below. Using either service greatly supports my channel, and I'll appreciate it tremendously.